Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have a special guest with me today. I met this young man, and I say that affectionately because he's 86 years of age, and he will be 87, Lord willing, on July 1st. And I met him at Newkirk's Barbershop about a year or two ago, and we had a wonderful conversation. And I'm the type of person that I'm always open to gleaning from wisdom and understanding, especially from individuals who are much older and have learned things that I've never learned and endured and encountered things that I've never experienced. And I would say that with Mr. Bob Fuller, he's probably forgotten more than what I know. Mr. Bob Fuller, thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure being here.
So when we first met about a year or two ago at the barbershop, we talked about several things, and we'll get into some of that today. We talked about the Jim Crow era.
Yes.
And the implications upon Black Americans during that time frame. But we also went a little bit deeper and talked about the political implications
Yes.
and what that meant for Blacks, whether they should be Democrat and or Republican. But I just want to tell a funny story before we get rolling. When you came to the studio today, you didn't have on your wonderful jacket. I didn't have mine on as well. And I offered you the opportunity to allow me to hang up your jacket in my office, and we didn't have to wear a jacket on camera. And this is what this young man told me. He said, you know what, man, I want to be halfway civilized, so allow me to put on my jacket. You know, what that said to me is that you represent an era in America where decency meant something as a Black man. Right? And today we don't see a lot of that, especially with a lot of our artists and people who are in the entertainment world and athletes, even amongst men of the cloth and preachers and pastors. And so I want to get into a little bit of that as well. Where do you think we lost this notion of decency and what's appropriate in our country?
It's the time frame is a little shady, but it's like most things. It creeps in. It's not sudden.
Okay.
I've been to church and I've seen people dressed like they're going to the beach.
Dressed like they're going to the beach.
Yes. I have a friend that I met. He lives in South Carolina, and he's a preacher. And so I was there, and I went to his service, and he comes out with jeans and his shirt tailed out. To preach.
Wow.
But I thought, I expected him to at least have on a jacket, but he didn't. But that's acceptable now.
Right. So what you're saying is the times are changing.
Yes.
What do you think is moving that shift? What is the impetus behind it? Why are we changing when it comes to dress, attire, and the dignity that goes along with it? Why is that shift taking place?
I think it's a matter of not caring anymore. When I was a young man, we, what they call, dressed to impress. We dressed our best. And now it seems it's the opposite. We dressed our worst. How bad can we look?
Right.
Instead of how impressive can we look?
Right. Do you think that there's a dignity applied to a person and how they present themselves?
Yes, I do.
Would you
Yes,
say
I
that?
do.
And because you were born in what year?
38.
1938, and it's now 2025.
Yes.
Right. What were some of the challenges that you saw as a young man coming up, whereas you needed to dress to impress in order to convey the right message during a highly segregated time frame?
That was the standard. In fact, I can't remember the author, but there's a book that I read early in my career, Dress to Impress. And it taught you how to dress, what tie goes with what suit, etc. How to dress to impress the people that you're going to meet.
Right.
And think about it. We go to this is what puzzles me. We go to a a black tie fell and we wear a tuxedo.
Right.
And then we turn around and we go to church with shorts on. Where is the sense in that?
Yes, it doesn't make sense. We should offer God our best. If we're going to wear a black tie attire for an event of such nature, shouldn't we offer something better to God?
Exactly.
Yes, that does. So you're saying that the church is more so now today becoming more casual,
Yes,
laid back,
yes.
and that's not dressing to impress.
No.
That's more so just throwing out,
Yes.
or preparing yourself in a manner where it really doesn't matter about where you're going. Let's get into your background a little bit. Where were you born? Where were you raised? What was family life like for you coming up during the 1940s?
I was born in Durham, North Carolina. My father followed his big brother to D.C., so I grew up in D.C. Started school in D.C., went to join the Air Force right after high school. That was in 1956, and had some things that happened in the Air Force that you may or not be interested in. I've always been
Indulge me. What happened?
sort of a maverick, for lack of better description.
Okay.
Now, I'm in Lackland Air Force Base. Now, this is 1956. There is no central air conditioning. You had window air conditioning that you put in the window.
Got it. Okay.
So when you're in basic training, they always give temporary ranks to those that the drill instructor thinks has got it. So,
Sure.
And so this was one of those guys that had the drill instructor had made the squad leader, and he and I didn't get along. He was white, and we didn't get along.
Right.
So one night the drill instructor said, "Find somebody to clean my room." So, guess what? He came to me, and I told him, I said, "I'm not cleaning that room." But I said, "I'm not cleaning the room. It's not my room." So the drill instructor called me in. What he did, it's sell and not tell is what it was. He said, "Look, I've got air conditioning, and in '56, a radio was prime, especially being in basic training, because if you've never been in the military, the first thing they do is they take everything away from you and give it back to you in little pieces, okay?" So he says, "It's air conditioning, you got a radio in here you can listen to." So I called a couple of my buddies. There was three of us. They did the cleaning while I just relaxed, and then people were knocking on the door. "Bob, can I come in?" "Nope, that's it." So he did a good job of selling and not telling. And that's the way you do it when you're trying to get somebody to do something. One of the best books I've ever read was, you may have read it or be familiar with, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right, by Carnegie.
Yes.
So.
Wow. That's impressive. What was it like going through segregation? What was Durham like during that time frame?
I grew up in D.C. I was born in Durham, but I grew up in D.C.
Grew up in D.C.
Yeah.
What was D.C. like during that time frame when it comes to segregation?
Well, D.C. was segregated. It was under Jim Crow. We couldn't eat at the lunch counter. We couldn't go to a department store and try on a pair of shoes, or a lady couldn't try on a dress. And
so how did you all try on
garments?
You didn't.
You took it home. You couldn't try it on.
You had to buy
it and take it home.
Could you return it possibly?
I don't know. Mom and Dad was doing all the buying, so that I can't remember.
So they pretty much, Mom had to look at you and go to the store and know what size you wore, whether it was small, medium, large.
With shoes, what my mother would do, she would get a piece of cardboard and draw an outline of my foot and take it to the shoe store to get shoes from me.
Are you serious?
Serious as I can be.
At what age was this?
8, 9, somewhere in there. You forget the years after.
So she would pretty much have to do a stencil as a cutout of your shoe size to take it to the store.
Yes.
And what was the issue with black people trying on shoes? What was the problem?
Because white people didn't want to try on anything that you tried on. That was the reason you couldn't try them on.
Why do you think that was a big issue? Is there something wrong with blackness? Is there some type of osmosis that they feared Is there some
It's
type
got
of...
to be, because you got to remember that they had black and white water fountains back then under Jim Crow.
Let's talk about that. What was that like? Have you ever had to drink from the black water fountain, and did you ever try to drink from the white one?
I don't recall facing that in D.C., but another strange story about the Air Force, this is again in 1956, and we flew from D.C. to Lackland Air Force Base for basic training, and we had one stop, I think it was somewhere in Alabama. And those planes back then did not have restrooms on it. So we landed at the halfway mark. I'm the first one off the plane, and I get into the terminal. I see the sign that says toilet, men. So I go in, right? And I see a couple of white guys coming in behind me, and I said, where are all the brothers, to myself? I come out of there, and I walked in the opposite direction. Then I saw a toilet that said, toilet colored men, pushed the door open. There they were, all in there.
And so when you went into that bathroom, I guess no one bothered you.
No one bothered me. No.
Right, that's good. That's good. What did that make you feel like, knowing that you're serving your country, but you get there and there's that level of separation and segregation?
Well, you go back to what I knew about the Constitution and the Founding Fathers when they said to form a more perfect union. Yes. It is not perfect, but what we're going to do is try to make it better.
It's seeking to form one.
Yes.
Yes. And so with those encounters, dealing with the segregations, the black water fountain and the white water fountain and the black bathroom and the white bathroom, and not being able to go and even try on shoes at a department store, did it develop a level of hatred in your heart towards white people?
I wouldn't say hate. I don't think I've ever hated anybody. I've disliked some people, but I don't think I've ever hated anyone.
Right.
So no, I wouldn't say it developed a hate. It made me more of a maverick, for lack of a better description. There's a book that I read, I forget how long ago, but the title of it is, now my senior moment is kicking, and Black Rage.
Black Rage, yes.
It was written by two black psychiatrists. And it talks about how the average black man of my generation and before me, they grew up subliminally hating their mothers because their mothers told them don't, trying to keep them from getting lynched or beat up. Don't do this. You can't follow what your feelings. You can't do this.
Sure.
And so they grow up, and the mothers has restricted them so long, trying to keep them safe by telling them don't.
Right. And so you pretty much were the kind of individual where even though the signs are there, the segregation is there, you're saying regardless of that, you're still going to do what you desire to do.
Exactly.
And no one's going to hold you back.
Yes.
And so one could say that even with all of the segregation and separation that you endured in serving your country, you never developed a victim mentality.
No.
And why is that? Because one of the things that we see today within the black community, there's a hefty conversation around black liberation theology, around victim mentalities, the lack of accountability. Someone owes us something. We want reparations. We want payment for the injustice of what blacks endured in this country through slavery and Jim Crow. How come you were able to come up during that same era, but you never developed a hatred towards white people, nor did you ever see yourself as a victim?
That would require a very long thought and a long-winded answer. But what I did want to inject in the conversation was 1960. I had just gotten out of the Air Force, and they were recruiting people for the Freedom Riders in the South. And they came through D.C.
Yes, sir.
And I went for an interview. And they ask you a myriad of questions. And one of the questions they asked me, they said, can you have somebody spit in your face and call you nigger? And I said, no. And they said, well, I'm glad you were honest with us. We cannot use you. because you will wreck the movement.
Right.
We want non-violent people, and so
you were more like Malcolm X and
exactly
and less like Dr. King.
Another one of the great books I've read is Malcolm's autobiography.
Yes, sir.
I recommend everybody, especially and whites, to read that.
Sure.
Let me tell you a good story about Malcolm's autobiography. When we moved to Charlotte, this is '73, and that's less than a decade after the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So you still got a lot of segregation going on, right? People are trying to make the change. And so we moved into this 99% white neighborhood in Charlotte.
Right.
Next door neighbor moves in, and he is upset when he found out his next door neighbors are black. I mean, he was really upset. The only reason I know this is because we became friends. And after we became friends, that's when he told me the story. And after we became friends, I said, Tom, if you want to get to know me better, I want you to read this book. I gave him a copy of Malcolm's autobiography, and he read it. And you know how I know he read it? Because he came running over my house one day. Bob, did you ever conk your hair? I said, no. I said, I don't do what everybody else is doing. I go my own way.
And help my audience conk your hair. What?
That's when you put that stuff in it to make it straight, so it looks like you're white. Like you got straight hair.
The lie.
Yeah.
Perm the hair.
Yeah, that's
process it, slick it back.
Your hair. Yeah,
they call it conking.
Yeah, back then.
See, I just learned a new term. It's called conking your hair. Now the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. I don't have any hair to conk, okay? But we just learned a new term. And what year would you say this was when that took place?
This would have been 74, 75.
74, 75. They were conking their hairs, but Mr. Bob Fuller had none of it.
May I add another little story to show you how close of friends we became? And we're still friends to this day. The hardware store was in walking distance, and we go to the hardware store and bought an axe because you got a fireplace you need to chop up. I said, Tom, you want to have some fun? He said, what? I said, you get about 10 feet in front of me, and I'm going to chase you with this axe. He said, okay.
No way.
I told my brother, he said, do you realize you could have been shot? I said,
oh, well. So you were a maverick indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. We talked one time at the barbershop about how many people fail to realize or fail to acknowledge that the Democrat Party was the party that pushed a lot of the Jim Crow laws and created those laws and what people had to go through during that era. Let's talk about that politically and what was told to Black Americans when they came to vote.
All right, I will answer that this way. I do not understand, and nothing's 100%. Even Ronald Reagan said, if you get 80% of what you want, take it and walk away because you're not going to get 100%.
That's good.
But let's take that 80-20. I cannot understand any black man my age being a Democrat because they were old enough. TV was still fairly in its infancy, and you only had 3 stations back then, ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Wow.
And they all covered the riots. All of the people that were beating up the black folks, the dogs, they were all Democrats.
Let's stop there. The riots that you're speaking of, which ones in particular?
Well, I'm sorry. I guess I should have used the protest. It was the police that were doing the rioting, as opposed to the people.
Okay, the police that were, okay.
Yes.
And the news would cover it. There were only 3 stations.
Right.
And blacks who were from that era, like you, they can recall who was doing it.
Exactly.
And it was primarily pushed as a political regime?
Yes.
Which particular political party was doing it?
It was the Democrats. They knew that. Wallace, Stennis, they were all Democrats. And the District of Columbia being special, you could not vote. So Congress passed...
You couldn't vote at all?
No, but Congress passed a law giving in 62, giving the District of Columbia 3 electoral votes, because that's the minimum you can have. And as you're aware that your electoral votes are based on your membership in Congress. So even the smallest state has 1 representative and 2 senators. That's why the minimum is 3. So we got 3 electoral votes. And when I went to register, the lady asked me, how do you want to register? And I said, anything but a Democrat. And she said, would you like to register as a Republican? I said, well, I don't know that much about the Republican. She said, well, you can register as a Democrat, independent, no party affiliation. I said, okay, that's the way I will register, as an independent. And every time I've moved, I've kept my independence registration. Now, if we can go back to the barbershop for a brief moment.
Yes.
Now, our friend, I don't know if we should call him by name, but he was
Ray Sean McCoy.
Right.
Oh yeah, we can call him by name.
He's a registered Democrat.
Uh-huh.
And he's been cutting my hair for more than 30 years.
Right.
And you know what happens in the barbershop.
Yes.
Politics is always discussed.
It is.
So preaching to Ray over the years about the Democrats, finally one day I went in there and he said, Mr. Fuller, he says, I changed my registration. I said, what did you say? He said, I changed it from Democrat to independent. I said, good for you, Ray. So I knew that I made an impression on him.
Right. And how many years did that take?
Well, it probably took 8 to 10 years, somewhere in that range.
Eight to 10 years, but it worked because your arguments are irrefutable. The people who walk around that are blacks who have this entitlement spirit, this victim mentality, they never endured some of the things that you contended with. You saw these things for yourself, right?
I have another nice story I think you might enjoy. It goes back to my time in the Air Force.
Sure.
And I was in Alaska for 2 years because that was considered overseas assignment because it was a territory at the time. And I was in radio communications. And have you been in the military?
I haven't.
Okay, well, the military is famous for its acronym. We were putting in what was called the DEW line, D-E-W.
Okay.
Distance Early Warning. Now, you got to remember, this is in the mid-'50s. There's nothing in the sky but that thing the size of a medicine ball, Sputnik, that Russia had put up. So we were putting in all of these military sites along the west coast of Alaska. Wow. So if anything leaves Russia going east, DEW line, okay? So since you were in the military, a KP is acronym for Kitchen Patrol, which means you had to be there to serve food for everybody else for more than 12 hours.
Right. Wow.
So this was a Saturday and Friday. We'd been out partying, and I had about 4 hours of sleep. And this young white fella, you know, I'm sitting there waiting. We've got the place prepped, and we're just waiting for the people to come. And you got about 15 minutes before we open up and start serving. Sure. So I'm sitting there with my head on the table in my hands, and he, get up, because he's white, I'm black. Get up. I told you to get up.
No way.
And so he tried to pull the chair from underneath me when I didn't get up. I got up, pushed him upside the wall with a couple of expletives, and I said, yada, yada, yada. So he wanted to get me in trouble. He called the first sergeant because it lasted for a week. So he knew I'm going to be there for a week. So our first sergeant comes in and down to the chow hall, and the guy says, told the first sergeant what happened. And the first sergeant was a red-headed Irishman. So now I knew in the back of my mind, he's had his share of being discriminated against, being Irish and being red-headed. Right. So here's the way the first sergeant handled it. He said, I can give him an Article 15, which is like a slap on the hand, and he'll refuse it, I know. And he says, and then we'll have to go to court. Right. And when we go to court and they find out you tried to pull the chair from underneath him, you'll be in more trouble than he is. Now, is that what you want? Oh, no, Sergeant. I said, I'll let you handle it.
I like that. Powerful story. You referenced the statement, anything but a Democrat.
Yes.
Right? Anything but a Democrat. What does that mean? And what were the makings and or the ideologies of the Democrat Party that just caused you to want to repel it and to shun it?
Well, if you know anything about history, you know it was a Democratic Party that started the Civil War. If you're going to be honest, you know,
yes.
The Democrats wanted slaves, and Lincoln said, no, we don't want to have slaves. So, And then you fast forward to the 60s with the demonstrations and the police riots.
The police riots. Yes, 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 yes.
And, you know, they were all Democrats. So, again, to repeat myself, I do not understand how a black man my age, given that 80-20 again, can be a Democrat if he knows history.
But I know many who say it's the Democrat Party that supports black Americans the most and have historically. How come you could see that vividly, but there's so many blacks today who just miss it, and they think that their saving grace is wrapped up in the donkey in the Democrat Party?
Well, I on my radio, when I'm in my car, I listen to more talk radio than I do music.
Okay, so you're not running. You're not.
I always want to be informed. Okay. And if the name G. Gordon Liddy means anything to you, okay. One morning I was going somewhere and I'm playing with the AM dial and this guy's talking politics. And I stopped and left it on that station. And then the announcer says, the G. Gordon Liddy show will be right back. I said, wait a minute, this can't be G. Gordon Liddy because the Washington Post, ABC, NBC told me I was supposed to hate this man, right? But now I'm listening to him and getting his thoughts, and I tuned into his station as long as he as long as he had the station, and then he was appearing in Greenville. I forget the year now.
Sure.
So I decided I'm going to go and listen to him. So and he was at least in his late 70s at this point in time, or early 80s. I get the timeline a little confused. But when he opened up the floor for Q&A, I said, G-Man, because he was in the, I said, do you remember the do line? He said, yes, the distance early one. I said, I was part of that crew that put in the do line. So at the end of it, he was signing photographs, and he looked up at me, and my nickname is Rogue, which
Rogue,
yeah, which my two buddies we hung together in Alaska gave me that nickname.
Right.
So he signed it and said, Rogue, thanks for putting in the do line. And it was a picture of him standing at the back of his Corvette,
right,
and the tag says H2O Gate.
I love it, Watergate. So why did they give you the nickname Rogue?
Because of my attitude toward things, and I said, if I'm a rogue, it takes one to know one. There were three of us that hung together, and that's why when I moved to North Carolina and they offered the vanity plates, I got the vanity plate Rogue. Yes.
So you've been able to have a successful career in business and to retire and do quite well for yourself.
Yes.
You know, your father, I think you recently told me that you're a great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather, yes, just about a year ago, yeah.
As well. And so when I just think about all of your challenges, the things that you had to overcome, but you to be able to still realize the American dream, do you have the same sentiments that many people have today that are a part of, of the groups like the NAACP and others who have... I
used to be a member of the NAACP, but then after I looked at some of the things they were doing, I quit. I dropped out of the NAACP and quit making contributions because they became too left for me.
So let's talk about some of the things that they were doing. The NAACP, what rubbed you the wrong way? What made you no longer want to...
It's always a lot of little things that add up. And I can't say this is it.
Sure.
There's a lot of little things over the years, and I say, okay, that's it.
What about
I've had it with the NAACP. I try to make, as Shakespeare said, to thy own self be true. I try to be true to myself. Well, I stopped watching the NFL.
Sure.
Although I did cheat a little bit. I watched the Super Bowl this year, but prior to that, I hadn't watched an NFL game in about 4 years.
Are you serious?
And here's the reason why. You remember Kaepernick taking a knee?
Yes. Colin.
Okay, so I went online and I looked at what the players are obligated to do, and it says they are obligated to stand during the national anthem, and the NFL would not endorse that. Okay, that was, for lack of a better description, strike one. Strike two, there were some police officers assassinated in near Dallas, Texas. The Dallas Cowboys wanted to make tribute to them by putting something on the helmet to pay tribute to those officers.
Right.
The NFL said no.
Wow.
Strike two. George Floyd comes along, and the NFL let them put BLM on the back of the helmet. I said, strike three. I'm through with you, NFL.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So...
And so what you're pretty much saying is you saw the leftist indoctrination that the NFL was pushing.
Yes.
And you have a choice to tune in to the NFL or not.
Exactly.
And instead of watch this insanity take place right before your eyes, you chose to just not watch it and to forego seeing it. Which also speaks to your values and to your morals. I would say personally that the NAACP has deviated greatly from their mission.
Yes.
It used to be about the advancement of colored people, but today, from the way I see it and having a biblical worldview, it's not about the advancement of colored people. It's about the advancement of queer people, all right?
Yes.
And people who practice lifestyles that the Bible speaks against.
Yeah, exactly.
And do we hate those people? No, we don't. We love those people, but we do know that if they remain in their sins, then they will not make it to heaven, right? And also the counterproductive statistics as it relates to the impact that that lifestyle has on a person's mind and body. It's not beneficial. It's been said that homosexual sex removes nearly 20 to 25 years off of a man's life. So the most loving thing I can do for a person who's in that lifestyle is to persuade them with love and with truth to deviate from that kind of living. You know, in Genesis 1:27, the Bible keys in on the fact that we're created male and female. Then in verse 28, it talks about three critical things that's significant from the male and female construct, which is number one, you can replenish the earth and you can multiply, and it's fruitful. The queer lifestyle won't lead towards multiplication or replenishing or being fruitful because God's design is male and female coming together, bringing forth life.
Yes.
That can't take place when it's 2 men or 10 men at that, 2 women or 10 women at that, right? But it's only when you do it God's way. Now, that was one of the critical things that led to me wanting to distance myself from the NAACP. Being jealous when he took over, he had to find a creative way to get the NAACP out of the red. They were hemorrhaging memberships and funding. And he took on the issue of the LGBTQIA plus agenda, which also led them to create what they call a progress flag. And in that flag, they include a brown stripe and a black stripe, which represents Black Americans. And what they're saying is that the struggle for the LGBTQ community in our country is tantamount to what you went through. The struggle through Jim Crow, which is, that's a distasteful and dastardly statement.
It is.
To have someone full stop do that and to equate the things that you have gone through in this country as a citizen, fighting for your country, putting your life on the line, being a part of the do line and everything in between, right? To say that a person's sexual persuasion equates to what you went through, that's a slap in the face.
Yes,
Wouldn't you agree?
It is. Speaking of the NAACP, I have a story that you may or may not be aware of. But Mfomi, am I pronouncing this?
Yes.
When he was president?
Yes.
And Teresa Hines, am I remembering correctly?
Yes.
She was speaking at the NAACP. This is back several years, obviously. And she said she was an African American. And he got upset. What do you mean you're an African American? And she said, I was born in Africa. Where were you born?
Oh, are you serious?
Serious, it's a heart attack.
That's good. That's good. You know, also one of the things that I want to key in on from your story is that you always remained gainfully employed. You didn't allow the Great Society Lyndon B. Johnson era
Right.
to cause you to be subservient to government.
Well, I had, let me tell you how I started off working for the government when I got out of the military. I worked for the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, he was about the same age as I, 1 or 2 years, and I saw him one day with a coat and tie and a briefcase.
Mm.
And he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I sell life insurance for Prudential." And of course, I can't sell anything that I don't personally believe in.
Mm.
And I said, "Well, I like that." And but I had an insurance policy with Metropolitan Life, so I wanted to see to Metropolitan Life and see if they had any openings.
Mm.
And I had been at the post office for, at that point, 3 or 4 years. I forget,
Sure.
the years melt away. And I remember one of my coworkers, "You're going to leave your good government job and go into the private sector?" I said, "Yes, because I have confidence in me."
You wanted to test the free market.
Yes, and the reason, because I can't sell anything I don't believe in. I sold life insurance for Metropolitan Life for a couple of years, and I had a tragedy that happened which caused me to change that, because I thought that was going to be my professional. In fact, I even took the Chartered Life Underwriters course, Part 1, and it comes in 3 different parts. That's how serious I was, but something happened that made me change my mind. Where was I going now?
You took the test. You believed in yourself more than the government. Yep.
Senior moment.
It's all right.
Oh, where was I going with that? That's what happens with me. Sometimes I start to tell a story and I get ahead of myself, and then I forget to go back to where I left off.
Yeah. We'll edit all that. But
Okay.
You talked about the Prudential Test 1.
Oh yeah, because I can't sell anything that I don't believe in.
That's
when
right.
I left Metropolitan Life, I worked for the Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I was offered a job by a whiskey distributor there in the District of Columbia, because he liked my presentation.
Right.
And then I was offered a job by National Beer, which makes Colt 45, and that sounded intriguing.
Right.
And again, I have to be loyal to myself. I don't like Colt 45. I drink Budweiser. So I went to Anheuser-Busch, had a branch operation. So I said, I'm going to see if they have an opening. And they did. And as they say, the rest of the story is history, because I spent 31 years with them.
Yes. And one of the things that you did show more than anything is that you believed in yourself
Right.
more than you believed in the government.
Yes.
And you knew that the government would only give you enough to keep you subservient.
Exactly.
But that there was much more that you could do with your hands, with your feet, with your mind,
Yes.
and with your brain. I want to get into, we talked about this on the phone. I don't know all the details of your story about faith. You are a man of faith. You are a Christian, but you haven't been to a church in a while. I want to talk about that because there are many Christians out there that I hear sometimes who say the same thing, that, I'm a Christian, but I don't attend a church regularly. Let's talk about that.
Grew up a Baptist, and I met my wife, who was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So trying to unify the family, I took instruction in Catholicism.
Okay.
Okay? But, and here's where the confusion, I had 3 different points that confused me to some degree. When I was still in the Baptist church, sang in the young adult choir, and on one occasion, I was in the back for, I can't remember why, after collection had been taken, and one of the deacons said he made a mistake. He put too much in the collection box and wanted X number of dollars back, or X whatever. I can't. I do what I remember. He wanted some money back.
He wanted a refund.
Okay. Yes. And then we got invited to New York City to sing, and there was deacons up there with someone other than their wives. Okay.
Yeah. Strange women.
Yeah. So
forbidden women.
Yes. And then when I decided to take lessons in Catholicism because I was marrying a Catholic lady, the priest that was giving me the instructions, he disavowed his vows and ran off and got married. Another thing. Okay. Then at a Catholic bazaar, they were selling dolls, and there was this grandmother. She had a grandchild with her, about 5 or 6, and she saw this little black doll, and she wanted the little black doll, and the grandmother tried to convince her that she would like the little white doll better. Now here she is at a church bazaar, going to church, and just in the back of my mind, I said, I don't want to be around people if they think like this and they're going to church and trying to tell me that they're saved.
Sure.
So I do believe in God. If you've got any ounce of intelligence, you have to know that there is a God, because there are things, we can make an automobile, we can build a building, but we cannot create life. There's too much here to think that it's somebody else or some superpower is not involved.
Right, that's good. Well, so I guess what you're saying is you saw too many inconsistencies.
Yes.
Within churches, be it the Baptist church, with the deacons, with the gentleman wanting a refund from his offering, to traveling and seeing them commit adultery.
Yes.
Those things, and what happened also within the Catholic Church. And I would say to you on that, the Bible says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There are sins of omission and sins of commission. But we have grace and mercy through Jesus Christ. And this mercy and this grace is renewed for us every morning. The only time that the church is perfect is when you cut the lights off, set the alarm, and everyone leaves. The moment the best person in the church walks into that church, just one person, think of the best Christian that you know. Let that person walk into that church. That church now becomes imperfect. What am I saying? I'm saying that man has a propensity to be flawed. And that's why man needed a Savior. And we have that Savior. And we know who that Savior is. Who is he?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Now, there are expectations that we should have for leadership, right? For the preacher, for the pastor, for the deacon, that they wouldn't be out there looking for refunds and or committing adultery. And so I understand that. But I would say to you that there are churches out there where pastors are leading well. Congregants are devout and committed to the faith. And that I don't want you at 86, soon to be 87 on July 1st, to not have the opportunity to still go to church because of those past things. Now, you did tell me earlier that you had a nickname, and the nickname is Rogue.
Right.
And so therefore, that tells me a whole lot about your personality. You know what I mean? Once you get settled and entrenched in the thing and you believe a thing, you're going to hold down and hunker down, right?
Yes.
But I say to you, Mr. Fuller, I welcome you to come to church with me. I'll be honest with you. There are some imperfect people there. All right? You're looking at one of them, but there are more people there striving towards the masteries, striving towards holiness, striving towards dotting every I and crossing every T. reaching and pressing towards the mark of the high calling that is in Christ Jesus. There are more people there doing that than there are people just being comfortable in doing debauchery and sin. And so I've never extended that opportunity to you. I didn't know your story around faith and where you were. But as a young man at the age of 40, soon to be 41 in July. July 18th.
I'm chuckling because my oldest grandson just turned 35.
so there you have it. So I mean, like I said, I'm still wet behind my ear. You know, you've forgotten more than what I know, but I do want to extend that to you. You know, to come fellowship with us. Come to a church service. We have 2 services. One starts at 8 a.m. And it's typically over around 9:30 p.m. And you can wear suit and tie. We tuck our shirt tail in and everything like that. And we have a second service that starts around 11, and it typically ends around like 2 o'clock. And so I would recommend starting out for you to come to the 8 a.m. service. You know, it's probably, I would say, maybe 8 to 10 minutes from the barbershop where we go to. You would enjoy it. I'm there. My family is there. We could reunite and connect. I can introduce you to the senior pastor, who is my father-in-law, Bishop Patrick Lane Wooden Sr. And I think he would hit it off well with you because he's also a man that is very sagacious and grave, but also believes in decency and decorum and order, and comes from an era where blacks walked in a good sense of pride. They were well educated, well groomed, well mannered, you know, decent and appropriate. That's the kind of pastor that we have leading this church, and his excellence is something that he leads out with. And for men like yourself, you would see that immediately.
In '73, I got a promotion, left D.C., and I lived in Charlotte for 6 years, from '73 to '79. Mm-hmm. And my job then was to work the black retail outlet for Anheuser-Busch, because we knew our white wholesalers were not doing it. So Anheuser-Busch said, okay, we need to make sure that that part of the market is covered.
Right.
Okay, now, we have what's called a state convention where everybody that sells beer meets to discuss business. Mm-hmm. And we were in Winston-Salem, and this guy was the Pabst distributor in Fayetteville. I'm sure he's deceased now because he was several years my senior. And he had had too much to drink, and he called me a nigger. Oh, we got a nigger that works for us, too. And my immediate report was the division manager. And after he says, Bob, I didn't know what you were going to do, but I was with whatever you did. So I just told him, I said, you know what? I said, 10 years ago, I would have cut you long, wide, and deep. I said, but today you have my sympathy.
Wow.
And when he realized he had stepped in it, he apologized. He was very apologetic. He said, the next time you come to Fayetteville, we'll play a game of golf. I'll take you out to dinner, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. And he lived up to it. My next trip to Fayetteville, went to the most expensive restaurant in Fayetteville. We played a game of golf. And so that's how I handled it. And it's true. You know, if it had happened several years before, there would have been fights on.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I had, matured, and I told him.
And you think it's, what do you think was the thing that led towards the softening of your heart versus being more aggressive in a response?
Just maturing.
Your faith?
Maturing overall. And I had another story about Anheuser-Busch that I would like to tell you that very few people know. I sued the company for discrimination. And I was trying to get all of the black guys that had those jobs called on, they all turned me down because my attorney was Julius Chambers at the time. But he got hired by the NAACP, so he had to turn it over to another attorney. And I think that's why I called it a draw. The reason why I called it a draw, the judge said they did not find discrimination because the company said I had a frivolous case and I should pay their legal fees. And the judge said his case was not frivolous. Each party will pay their own legal fees. Mm. And from that, in the field, we had nobody higher than a district manager. And I was the first black district manager in the South because I asked for the job.
Right.
And there was a friend, he became the first black division manager, and he came to me and he said, Bob, I want you to know that I don't think I would have gotten this promotion if it had not been for your lawsuit.
Wow.
And to go back when I was in the attorney's office, he said, you know what, this is not Judas. Judas has turned the case over to one of his partners. He said, you're the first person to sit in that chair who still works for the company, has no desire to leave the company. And I said, he said, in most cases, people have left the company and they're upset with the company. I said, this country is not a perfect country.
Yes.
Anheuser-Busch is a good company, but not a perfect company. I said, I am doing this to make Anheuser-Busch a better company.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. So to make them better, you challenge them.
Exactly.
And then you remain there.
Yes. I had no intentions of leaving.
Right.
I'm not leaving.
Right.
I got a very good job. I got to work for a good company, but it's not perfect.
Right. That's good. And that should be the same mentality that black Americans have in this country. It's not a perfect country, not a perfect founding, but it's a great country, and blacks do better here than any country.
Right, and we should be working to make it better, not trying to tear it down.
That's right, working to make it better, which pushes back against what we saw during the Summer of Love with BLM. Yes. The riots, the protests, during your era, the police protests and the police riots as well. I will say this, that I am going to continue having dialogues with you and just pulling out all of the gems and the jewels that you have to offer, because you are a reservoir and a wealth of knowledge. And I am going to continue also to invite you to come to church with me. And if I have to go by your house and be an escort, I would take that as a divine opportunity, okay? I'll pick you up in my vehicle. It'll be clean. I'll get out, open the door for you, take your jacket off, hang it up in the back seat, put you in the car, take you to church, let you park where I park, where my parking space is, right? We'll get out. I'll help you out of the car. Put your jacket on. You'll walk in with me, all right?
I hear you.
And we'll fellowship together, and I strongly believe it will be one of the most impactful and enriching ministry experiences that you've ever had. Mr. Bob Fuller, I want to thank you for coming on my show and having this conversation. And I believe that many people are going to be blessed by this segment and this episode, and we will do a part 2 and possibly a part 3 of this, because there's so much more wisdom that Mr. Bob Fuller has to share. The greatest takeaway that I can key in on from this episode is that although we live in an imperfect country, an imperfect world, imperfect companies, we should seek the better part of said nations, countries, companies, and the likes. We should seek to unify, to bring people together, to coalesce, and to point people towards the old rugged cross. From Mr. Bob Fuller's story, you can see that it was the opportunity to become a Christian and to get to know God as his personal Savior that kind of tapered him off a little bit and moved him from being Rogue Bob to being at a place where a person could call him, yes, an expletive, a slur, but he didn't respond in a manner that he would 10 years prior. He gave that person sympathy, which ultimately fostered a rich and meaningful relationship. Mr. Fuller, closing words, what would you like to share with the audience?
Gee, again, I'll go back to Shakespeare. to thine own self be true.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you, and thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.